completely night and day. I mean, it just was not a crime. And when I started policing in the 70s, it was a nuisance call, it was a loud disturbance call, there was no training for police, there were no policies, and the laws themselves in those years never defined domestic violence. It wasn't until the mid-'80s that criminal codes started to define what domestic abuse really is. And then after the laws were created, then we had to train police to understand that abuse is not just pushing, slapping, punching, it's much, much more. So we changed our training over the years, and we've gotten better at it. I mean, we're a long ways from where we were in the past. We've got specialists now in the field in sex assault and dating violence and domestic violence and stalking. We never had those expertise in the past. So it's not as fast as I'd like to see it evolve, but we are evolving in law enforcement. Well, I think sex assault is the big one. I think believing the victim, understanding consent, training officers to understand what trauma looks like, and not closing a case out because she can't remember all the details, but understanding that her memory's fragmented because of the trauma. So this has been a big hurdle for us to get over. So the numbers of reported rapes, 16, 17%, and one of the reasons for that is because the victims haven't trusted us to tell us, because we weren't ready. Now we're gearing up to get our officers around the country ready for this, because if you look at the Center for Disease Control, they've told us that 1 in 5 women, 1 in 5, will be a victim of an attempted or completed rape in their lifetime. That's 31 million U.S. women. That's the entire population of Canada. So these women aren't reporting. We're getting other crime reports of domestic violence and stalking, but they're not talking about the sex assault because they haven't trusted us, and for good reason, because we let them down. Now we're getting better. So that's sort of on the horizon, for policing. And then two, I think looking at these crimes more victim-centered and trauma-informed. Not pushing the victim into making full choices too fast. Because it takes a lot to make a decision to go into court, to sign a warrant, to assist with a rape investigation because of all that will happen to you afterwards. So this is a big moment for us. Well, you get what you pay for, and when you look at the hours dedicated to training law enforcement from the academy till they retire, average number of hours for an officer in any police or sheriff's academy for domestic violence is around 12 hours. That's the average, which means there are some academies that do 1 or 2 hours, 6 hours for sex assault, and you go out in the field as a young officer and you spend most of your career working crimes against women. It's just imbalanced. So we're trying to get the ear of law enforcement leadership nationwide, and they're listening to us now about the value of investing time in officers early on in their career to teach them the basics, and then more advanced training as they go through their career, because the better we get, the more victims report, because they see a positive impact on our understanding trauma and all the things you go through when you're a victim of a horrible crime like domestic or sexual violence. Reluctant means you're worried about talking to police, which is what I've seen most often. I saw it with my own mother, who's a survivor. I think training police to understand that reluctance and why she's reluctant is a big step forward, because most crime victims will say, yes, he stole my car, he broke in my house, go get him. This victim will tell you, no, nothing happened. And understanding why she does that will lead you to other questions like, it's not your fault. It could get worse. I'm here for you whenever you decide to leave. But leaving in the mind of the victim, let's say you don't have enough to investigate at that moment, leaving a lifeline to that victim, well, they'll know, you call me anytime. That is life and death stuff there. If we close the door and say, well, she's not cooperating, I'm not going back again, she only had one chance at it, that dooms the victim. Because leaving is not an event, it's a process. The police play a big, important role in that process. We're the gatekeepers, and the gate's got to stay open for the victim to walk through. You got to be aware of your own body language, especially with this kind of victim because of their experience. And you know, victims learn to read people, nonverbal, body language. It really has it's a message. It's a form of communication that we don't think much about when we talk to this particular victim, because we don't know who they are yet. But if we suspect they're victims of domestic violence, they survived with the skill of reading body language. If we stand over them, or we don't sit down, or we cross our arm, we look at our watch, we look distracted, or we stop them while they're talking, then who does that? The offender. So we look like the offender, and that's the last thing you want to have in the mind of a victim. Oh golly, I think the biggest thing is you're not alone. It's not your fault. You don't deserve any of this, none of it, and don't let anybody make you feel bad for what they do. These offenders, I've had so many interviews with victims after the fact, and they've all said, if only I could have seen it, if only, and they blame themselves because they were loving, kind people who were taken advantage of by somebody who's looking for a vulnerable, loving, kind person. So you don't blame yourself for this, and then learn from it, and then educate other people. I think if you survive it, I think there's some responsibility to say to your sister, your brother, your aunt, your classmate, let me tell you what I know about these people, and then have the resources for them as well, because I'm in law enforcement, and we're sort of the last place people come to often. People come to a lot of other people before they come to us. You should be prepared to be able to give them the right advice. And don't give up on them, because you may be the only one that's able to get them out eventually, and they need that lifeline from you so they don't feel like they're all alone. So that's pretty critical stuff. Because we have alcohol abuse and suicide. These are all some of the byproducts of being trapped in a relationship you can't get out of because you've got nobody to talk to. Or you can't talk to your mom and dad because they'll take you out of college and you don't want to go home. You've heard all this, I know. So you're in a real dilemma. So having somebody that you can look up to, a peer that says, I know somebody, we can go talk to them. And have that advocate at the shelter or on campus you can go to and say, where do I go? I need help.